Gazers, let's journey back in time. Imagine a world without the internet, without smartphones, where the greatest adventure was happening right above our heads. The date was July 20th, 1969. On this momentous day, something truly extraordinary occurred. Two American astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, became the first humans to ever set foot on another world. Their spacecraft, the Apollo 11 Eagle lander, touched down gently on the dusty surface of the moon. It was a destination that humanity had only dreamed of reaching, a silvery globe in our night sky that had inspired poets and scientists for thousands of years. This wasn't just a trip. It was the culmination of a decade of intense effort, a symbol of what people can achieve when they work together towards a common, audacious goal. The mission was part of the Apollo program, a massive undertaking by NASA. It was driven by a fierce competition with the Soviet Union known as the space race. Both superpowers wanted to be the first to demonstrate their technological and ideological superiority by conquering the final frontier. When Neil Armstrong took that first small step, he uttered words that would echo through history. "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for humankind." More than 500 million people on Earth were glued to their television sets, watching grainy black and white images being beamed across 250,000 miles of empty space. It was a shared global experience, a moment of unity and awe that transcended borders and politics, fundamentally changing our perspective of our place in the cosmos. This achievement wasn't just about planting a flag. The astronauts conducted experiments, collected samples of lunar rocks and soil, and deployed scientific instruments. They were our first geologists on another world. The rocks they brought back were like time capsules, providing invaluable clues about the formation of the moon, the Earth, and our entire solar system. These samples have been studied by scientists for decades and continue to yield new discoveries even today. The Apollo program pushed the boundaries of engineering, computing, and material science, leading to innovations that have since become part of our everyday lives, from cordless power tools to advanced medical imaging. The moon landing was, in every sense, a monumental scientific and cultural event. The legacy of Apollo 11 is profound. It inspired a generation of scientists, engineers, and dreamers to look up at the stars and ask, "What's next?" It proved that with enough ingenuity and determination, humanity could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The images of our beautiful blue planet hanging like a fragile marble in the blackness of space gave rise to a new environmental consciousness. For the first time, we saw Earth not as a collection of separate countries, but as a single, interconnected home that we must protect. The moon landing stands as a testament to human curiosity and our unyielding drive to explore the universe around us, to venture into the unknown and expand the horizons of our knowledge. Even as the world celebrated this incredible achievement, a different story began to take shape in the shadows. Almost immediately after the triumphant return of the Apollo 11 crew, some people started to question whether it had happened at all. They proposed a startling idea that the moon landing was a hoax. They suggested the entire event was faked, an elaborate deception staged by the US government. This wasn't just a simple doubt, it was the beginning of one of the most persistent and well-known conspiracy theories in modern history. The central claim was that the technology of the 1960s was not advanced enough to send humans to the moon and bring them back safely. So, the theory goes, the government faked it to win the space race against the Soviet Union. The idea gained momentum through books and pamphlets published in the years following the mission. One of the most influential was a 1976 self-published book called We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion Swindle, by a man named Bill Kaysing. He had worked for a company that helped build rocket engines for the Apollo program, but he had no direct scientific or engineering expertise in the missions themselves. His book laid out many of the arguments that would become the cornerstones of the hoax theory. He claimed that NASA, under immense political pressure, staged the landings in a secret film studio, possibly in the Nevada desert, using Hollywood special effects and carefully constructed sets to fool the world. Why would anyone believe such a thing? The context of the time is crucial. The late 1960s and 1970s were a period of great social and political turmoil. The Vietnam War was raging, and public trust in the government was at a low point due to events like the Watergate scandal. In this atmosphere of suspicion, the idea that the government could orchestrate a massive cover-up didn't seem so far-fetched to some. The conspiracy theory offered a simple explanation for a very complex achievement. It played on people's distrust of authority and their difficulty in comprehending the sheer scale of the scientific and engineering feat that was the Apollo program. For some, it was easier to believe in a grand deception than in a grand accomplishment. This narrative has proven to be remarkably resilient, surviving for more than half a century. It has been passed down and adapted over the years, finding new life with each generation and new platforms like the internet and social media. The theory is not a single unified belief, but a collection of different claims and questions about the evidence. Believers point to supposed anomalies in the photos and videos from the missions as proof of their claims. These whispers of doubt, which started in the wake of triumph, have grown into a loud and enduring counter-narrative that continues to challenge one of history's greatest moments of exploration, forcing us to re-examine the evidence and the nature of belief itself. Let's dive into the specifics of the case presented by those who doubt the moon landings. One of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence involves the photographs taken on the lunar surface. Conspiracy theorists point out that the shadows in these pictures are not always parallel to each other. They argue that if the sun were the only light source, all shadows should run in the same direction. The presence of non-parallel shadows, they claim, suggests that multiple light sources were used, just like in a film studio with spotlights and fill lights. This, to them, is a clear sign that the photos were not taken on the moon, but on a man-made set designed to look like it. For example, a famous photograph of Buzz Aldrin standing near the lunar module shows his shadow stretching out in one direction, while the shadows cast by rocks and craters nearby seem to point in slightly different directions. Doubters seize on this as definitive proof of fakery. They argue that the complex lighting required to create such an effect would be impossible with just the sun. They propose that a film crew carefully arranged powerful lamps to illuminate the scene, but they made a mistake in aligning the shadows perfectly. These perceived inconsistencies in the lighting are presented as a gotcha moment, a fatal flaw in NASA's otherwise meticulously crafted deception that reveals the entire event as a terrestrial production. Furthermore, some critics question why Buzz Aldrin, who is standing in the shadow of the lunar module in some photos, is still so clearly visible. If the sun were the only light, they reason, his spacesuit should be shrouded in complete darkness. The fact that he is well lit suggests the presence of a secondary light source, a fill light, to make him visible to the camera. This is another piece of the puzzle that, for believers in the hoax, points directly to a studio setting. They see this not as a natural phenomenon, but as a deliberate choice made by a director to ensure the astronaut was clearly seen in the shot, prioritizing cinematic quality over scientific accuracy. These arguments about shadows are compelling to those who are already skeptical. They seem to be based on simple, observable logic: one sun, one direction for shadows. Anything else must be a sign of tampering. The visual evidence of the photographs is powerful, and when presented with a narrative of deception, these perceived anomalies can seem like smoking guns. The shadow argument forms a core pillar of the moon landing hoax theory, a seemingly straightforward piece of evidence that encourages people to question the official story and to look more closely at the images that defined an era, searching for clues that they believe NASA missed. Another iconic image from the Apollo missions is that of the American flag standing proudly on the lunar surface. And it is this very image that has become a central point of contention for those who believe the landing was a hoax. The main argument revolves around a simple observation: the flag appears to be rippling or waving in some photographs and video clips. But how can a flag wave on the moon, where there is no air and therefore no wind? The moon's atmosphere is what we call a near-perfect vacuum. For skeptics, a waving flag in a vacuum is an impossibility, a blatant mistake made by the filmmakers who forgot that their lunar set was supposed to be airless. This claim is often presented with a sense of triumph, as if it is the undeniable proof that exposes the entire conspiracy. Proponents of the hoax theory suggest that the video was filmed on Earth, either outdoors where a natural breeze caught the flag, or inside a studio where a fan was accidentally left on. The rippling motion, they insist, could only be caused by the movement of air. They ask you to trust your own eyes and common sense. If it looks like it's waving in the wind, it probably is. This simple, intuitive argument is very effective because it doesn't require any complex scientific knowledge to understand, making it one of the most popular and widespread claims among doubters. The story they tell is that in the rush to produce a convincing fake, The production team overlooked this critical detail. In their minds, the flag should have hung down limply, completely still, once it was planted. The fact that it doesn't is seen as a careless error. They might even suggest that the astronauts themselves were struggling to make the flag look right on camera, causing the movement. This detail, seemingly small, becomes magnified into a symbol of the entire alleged deception. The flag, meant to be a symbol of American achievement, is ironically twisted into a symbol of supposed government deceit, its every fold and wrinkle scrutinized for evidence of a terrestrial origin. This argument about the flag is powerful because it taps into a fundamental and easily understood principle of physics that we all experience daily. Flags need wind to wave. By presenting an image that seems to defy this principle, the theory plants a seed of doubt. It encourages a line of questioning that challenges the very authenticity of the visual record. For those who believe in the hoax, the waving flag is not just an anomaly. It is a confession, a silent admission captured on film that the giant leap for humankind never left the ground. It remains one of the most enduring and visually persuasive arguments in the entire moon landing conspiracy lexicon. Let's turn our gaze to the lunar sky. In all of the photographs taken by the Apollo astronauts on the moon's surface, the background is a vast, empty, pitch-black void. There are no stars. Not a single one. This is another major piece of evidence used by those who claim the moon landing was faked. They ask a very reasonable question: if you are on the moon, with no atmosphere to obscure the view, shouldn't the sky be filled with the most brilliant, spectacular display of stars imaginable? The complete absence of stars in the photo strikes them as deeply unnatural and highly suspicious, suggesting the backdrop was nothing more than a black curtain in a film studio. The argument is straightforward and easy to grasp. On Earth, even in cities with light pollution, we can see some stars. From a truly dark location, the sky is teeming with them. The moon has no atmosphere and no light pollution, so it should be the ultimate place for stargazing. The fact that not a single photograph captures this celestial splendor is, for skeptics, a dead giveaway. They argue that NASA's set designers simply couldn't replicate the complex and accurate star patterns of the real sky. Fearing that astronomers would easily spot errors in a fake star field, they opted for the safe choice, a completely black background. This omission seems, to the doubters, like a colossal blunder. How could NASA, with all its brilliant scientists, forget to add stars to their fake lunar sky? The narrative they propose is one of hubris and oversight. In their elaborate scheme to fool the world, they focused so much on the details of the lunar surface, the dust, the rocks, the lander, that they overlooked the most obvious feature of the cosmos itself. The black sky is presented not as a natural outcome of photography, but as a deliberate and lazy artistic choice made by the creators of the hoax. It's a flaw that once you see it, you can't unsee. This claim, like the ones about shadows and the flag, relies on an appeal to our everyday experience and intuition. We associate the night sky with stars. A sky without them feels wrong, empty, and artificial. For conspiracy theorists, this is not a matter of camera settings or exposure times. It is a fundamental error in the composition of the scene. The starless sky becomes another exhibit in their case, a silent black testament to what they believe is the greatest lie ever told. It transforms a scene of triumph into a sterile, lifeless soundstage, undermining the authenticity of every image captured during the historic missions. Now let's put on our scientific thinking caps and examine these claims. Science thrives on skepticism and evidence, so let's address these points one by one, starting with those tricky shadows. Scientists explain that the non-parallel shadows on the moon are not proof of multiple lights, but are actually a natural effect of perspective on an uneven, three-dimensional landscape. Think about looking down a long, straight set of railroad tracks. They are parallel, but they appear to converge at a point in the distance. Similarly, shadows on a lumpy, cratered surface, when projected onto a two-dimensional photograph, will not all appear parallel, especially when the ground slopes up and down. The sun is indeed the only significant light source. What about the astronaut who is visible in the shadow? This is not due to a Hollywood fill light, but to something much more elegant: reflected sunlight. The lunar surface itself is highly reflective. Sunlight hits the bright gray dust, and that light bounces off in all directions, acting like a massive natural reflector. This reflected light illuminates objects that are in shadow, which is why Buzz Aldrin isn't a black silhouette. The moon's surface, the astronaut's own white spacesuit, and even the shiny lunar module all contribute to scattering light around the scene. This is a basic principle of optics that explains the phenomenon perfectly without needing to invent a conspiracy. Next, let's tackle the waving flag. The flag appears to ripple because of how it was deployed, not because of wind. The astronauts had to transport the flag in a thin tube. After being packed away for so long, the nylon material had creases and wrinkles in it, which made it look wavy. More importantly, NASA engineers knew there was no wind on the moon. To make sure the flag was visible and didn't just hang limply, they designed it with a horizontal rod extending from the top of the flagpole to hold it outstretched. On the Apollo 11 mission, the astronauts had trouble extending this telescoping rod all the way, causing the flag to bunch up and giving it that signature rippled look. The waving motion seen on video is simply the flag settling and oscillating after being planted in the ground, a movement that continues for a while in a vacuum because there is no air resistance to stop it. And what about the starless sky? This is perhaps the easiest claim to debunk, and it comes down to the basics of photography. The Apollo missions took place during the lunar daytime. The sun was out, and the lunar surface was brilliantly lit. To take a proper photograph of the brightly lit astronauts and their lander, the camera's shutter speed had to be very fast and its aperture set very small. This setting lets in just the right amount of light to capture the bright foreground subjects. However, the stars in the sky, while bright, are incredibly faint compared to the sunlit ground. With such a fast exposure, the camera simply could not capture the faint light of the distant stars. It's the same reason you can't see stars from Earth during the daytime. The sky is just too bright. Beyond simply debunking the claims of the doubters, there is a mountain of positive, verifiable evidence that proves the moon landings were real. One of the most powerful and enduring pieces of evidence is an experiment that is still running today. The Apollo astronauts from missions 11, 14, and 15 left behind special arrays of mirrors on the moon's surface. These aren't ordinary mirrors. They are called retroreflectors. They are designed to reflect a beam of light directly back to its source with minimal scattering. For over 50 years, observatories on Earth, like the McDonald Observatory in Texas, have been firing powerful laser beams at these specific locations on the moon. A few seconds later, highly sensitive detectors on Earth pick up the faint signal of the laser photons that have made the 500,000-mile round trip. By precisely measuring the time it takes for the light to travel to the moon and back, scientists can calculate the distance between the Earth and the moon with incredible accuracy, down to a matter of centimeters. This experiment, known as the Lunar Laser Ranging Experiment, has provided a wealth of data about the moon's orbit, its internal structure, and even tests of Einstein's theory of general relativity. The only way this experiment works is if the reflectors are exactly where NASA says they are. This evidence is particularly compelling because it is independent of NASA and the United States government. Observatories and scientific groups around the world, including those in France, Germany, and other countries, have successfully bounced lasers off these Apollo reflectors. This is not something that can be faked. You cannot trick a laser beam. The reflectors are physical objects on the moon, left there by human hands. It's ongoing, repeatable proof that you can test for yourself, provided you have a powerful enough laser and a very, very good telescope. It's a quiet, persistent confirmation of the Apollo legacy, humming along in the background of astronomy. Furthermore, let's consider the hundreds of pounds of moon rocks. The Apollo astronauts brought back a total of 382 kilograms, 842 pounds, of lunar material over the 6 missions. These rocks are unlike any rocks found on Earth. They show no signs of weathering by water or wind because the moon is airless. They are covered in tiny micrometeorite craters from millions of years of exposure to the vacuum of space. They have a unique chemical composition that tells a story of formation in a low-gravity, waterless environment. These rocks have been shared with and studied by thousands of scientists in laboratories all over the world for decades. No one has ever been able to prove they are terrestrial in origin. Forging this vast and complex collection of rocks would be, in itself, a feat arguably as difficult as going to the moon. So let's place the evidence from both sides on a cosmic scale and weigh them carefully. On one side, we have the conspiracy theorists. Their arguments are based primarily on interpreting supposed anomalies in photographs and videos. They present claims about non-parallel shadows, a waving flag, and a starless sky. These arguments are often very appealing because they are simple and rely on intuition and what we think we know from our everyday experience. They encourage us to distrust authority and to believe that a powerful government is capable of a massive deception. The core of their evidence is a personal interpretation of old images. The strength of the hoax argument lies in its simplicity and its appeal to emotion. It doesn't require deep scientific knowledge to wonder why a flag seems to wave or why there are no stars in the pictures. It plants a seed of doubt by asking questions that, on the surface, seem perfectly logical. However, the weakness of this side is that it offers no positive proof of its own. It only attempts to poke holes in the official account. The theory requires us to believe that hundreds of thousands of NASA employees and contractors kept a secret of this magnitude perfectly for over 50 years, a social impossibility far greater than the technological challenge of reaching the moon. On the other side of the scale, we have the scientific consensus. This position is supported by a vast and diverse body of evidence. First, there are the physical artifacts, nearly half a ton of unique moon rocks studied by scientists globally, none of whom have found them to be fake. Second, there is the ongoing lunar laser ranging experiment, where observatories worldwide bounce lasers off reflectors left on the moon by Apollo astronauts. Repeatable, physical proof you can't fake. Third, we have corroborating evidence from other countries. The Soviet Union, America's greatest rival, tracked the Apollo missions with their own technology. If the missions were fake, the Soviets would have been the first and loudest to expose the lie to score a massive propaganda victory. But they never did. They acknowledged the American success. Furthermore, in recent years, modern spacecraft from different nations, including Japan's Kaguya orbiter and India's Chandrayaan-1, have taken high-resolution photographs of the moon's surface. NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has captured stunningly clear images of the Apollo landing sites. In these pictures, you can clearly see the descent stages of the lunar modules left behind, the tracks made by the astronauts' boots in the dust, and the paths left by the lunar rovers. This is fresh, modern, photographic evidence from multiple independent sources that confirms the artifacts of the Apollo missions are still there, exactly where we left them. The weight of this physical, verifiable, and cross-validated evidence is simply immense. When we step back and look at the entirety of the evidence, the conclusion becomes overwhelmingly clear. The idea that the moon landings were a hoax is an intriguing story, a fascinating case study in psychology and the nature of belief. However, as a scientific claim, it completely falls apart under scrutiny. Every single argument put forth by conspiracy theorists has a logical, well-documented scientific explanation that is consistent with the laws of physics and the principles of photography. The non-parallel shadows are an effective perspective. The waving flag is a result of its design and the physics of momentum in a vacuum. The starless sky is a simple consequence of camera exposure settings. The sheer scale of the supposed conspiracy makes it untenable. To fake the moon landings would have required the silent complicity of over 400,000 people who worked on the Apollo program. It would have meant faking tons of moon rocks so perfectly that they fooled geologists for 50 years. It would have meant faking radio signals that were tracked by independent observatories around the world. It would have meant fooling the Soviet Union's intelligence network. The complexity and difficulty of orchestrating such a flawless, decades-long hoax would have been monumentally harder than actually just going to the moon. As is often the case, the simplest explanation is the most likely one. The scientific and historical consensus is therefore unambiguous. We did go to the moon. The Apollo missions of the 1960s and 1970s represent a genuine and spectacular achievement of human ingenuity, courage, and perseverance. The evidence is not just in the old photos from 1969, but in the rocks sitting in laboratories today, in the laser beams returning from lunar mirrors every night, and in the high-resolution images being sent back from modern orbiters. The moon landings were real, they happened, and they changed our world forever. It was a moment when we, as a species, reached out from our planetary cradle and touched another celestial body. So, the next time you look up at the moon, know that it is not just a distant, untouched world. It holds the footprints of 12 human beings. It holds the remnants of our first exploratory craft. It holds mirrors that still reflect our light back to us. The moon landing is not a matter of opinion or belief. It is a verifiable historical event, a cornerstone of our journey into the cosmos. It stands as a powerful reminder that when we are driven by curiosity and a bold vision, there are no limits to what we can achieve. The universe awaits, and the journey that began with that one small step is far from over.